Hey guys, Hella Bella here, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how I used Seal Krete's Epoxy-Seal to redo my shed and have a great before and after. I did the floor in my small outdoor shed with this paint, and I will say that the project took about one weekend to finish and about $150. So if you are looking for an affordable way to redo an outdoor space and this is something that you think that you can tackle, I'm here to show you the steps of that in this video. So Seal Krete is a product made by Rust-Oleum and it ranges around $50 for one can, and we also went ahead and used the primer that is also made by Seal Krete, and then we had to buy the chips that you throw in the floor, the little black and white chips, and we had to buy some miscellaneous cleaning supplies. So that is how I came up with the $150. It definitely depends on what size space that you're going to be redoing. Our space was super small because it's just a little outdoor room in my carport, so I'm really happy with the results of the project, and I think that, you know, it's a good beginner project. We do not have any experience doing this, so this is a first time thing for us, but we had talked to some family who did it before us and they said that it was a relatively easy process, and after finishing it all I can agree that it was pretty simple. It's a little bit time consuming because you do have to wait for everything to dry in between every single coat, but if you have a weekend to spare, I think that this could be a great project. So Seal Krete is one of the many paints that they make for outdoor spaces. You'll see people paint their patio, their carport, and some different types of things like porches, and one thing that I want to bring up is the reason that we chose this particular paint is because this surface was not one that we're going to be driving on. We rarely even walk on it, so overall it was a pretty low stakes thing. If I was actually going to paint an area that I was driving on, I probably would have chosen a more expensive paint, but since this is just something that was an area that is going to be less trafficked and not really many people are going to see it, I chose the Seal Krete. Rust-Oleum does have another product that is specifically for areas that you'll be driving over. Just keep in mind that I personally don't think this product would be good enough if you're going to be driving on it, but for something like an outdoor space, I think that it would work just fine. So let's get into the details of this project. So like most projects, the prep work is something that you really want to focus on. Specifically for us, it was taking everything out of the shed, which was a lot of stuff. Like, you would not believe how much stuff that we had packed in there. So we took everything out first and sort of put it all in my carport, and then we began to clean the floors. The floors had a layer of dirt that was probably here for 50 years because I bought this house from the only person who's ever lived in it besides me, and honestly I don't think they cleaned it either, so we're both pretty guilty of not cleaning that outdoor space. And to be honest with you, you really couldn't get to it before because it was so full of crap. So we did spend probably about 2 hours cleaning and prepping the floor, because if you don't prep the surface that you're painting, you might as well not even do the project at all, because to be honest, like, if you have dirt and layers of grime on the floor, the paint is not going to stay. So the first thing that we did was we prepped by cleaning everything, taking everything out, and just getting a smooth surface ready to paint. The first thing that we did after we finished cleaning was we let everything completely dry, and this didn't take very long because it's summer in Alabama, so it was already pretty hot that day. We used something called the Lockdown Concrete Primer, and it kind of went on like a milky substance. It was really thin, so I was kind of worried about it at first, and it does say on the package that you have to roll over it several times. So we first rolled over it, and then we came back about 30 minutes later and did it again, and then again, and eventually it did dry completely clear. At first it was kind of a weird texture to be working with, and I was slightly worried about it, but if you've ever done any kind of primer, you can tell that on certain surfaces the primer just goes on a little bit weird, but it did dry completely fine. So we opted to use the primer because we thought, you know what, let's do it right. It's only about $30 to add the primer on, and we hope that that would make the concrete a little bit better in terms of taking the paint. So after we did the concrete primer, we let that dry for about 2 hours. It's really important that you let things dry and you don't get too impatient, because if you try to do too much at once, that surface is not going to be able to hold the paint, and it's just not going to be successful in terms of your project. So like I said, we did roll back over that primer several times, and then we let it dry. After we let it dry, we did know that it was time to use the gray paint, the Epoxy-Seal Krete paint, and this is something that you don't have to do a lot of prep work to. We just simply took the lid off, mixed it up, and got ready to paint. So we poured it in the paint tray, and we first got some of those little brushes, and we did the edging of the entire shed first. That way we could just take a roller and do the floor really quickly. So once we did the edging, we were able to do the roller really fast, fast. It probably took not even 10 minutes to do that. And then once again, we had to let that dry for a couple of hours. So we wound up doing 2 coats total on this floor, and I think that that was plenty. We got good coverage in terms of the first coat was fine. It actually covered really well considering the texture of that concrete and how old it was and all of the different splotchy colors in the concrete. I think that the gray paint was a good choice because it definitely wound up hiding some of those flaws in the concrete. Now, if we really wanted to be thorough with this project, we could have filled in all the parts of the concrete that were, you know, cracked or whatever, but this is simply just a weekend project to make it look a little bit better. And we also knew that we were going to be throwing down those paint flakes. And so once you throw down those paint flakes, everything is pretty much camouflaged in terms of those little flaws that you would see if everything was just one color. So one thing that you need to know about the chips or the flakes that you pour on the floor is that you have to do that whenever the paint is very wet. So after we did that second coat, I very quickly went and threw all those chips on the floor, and I feel like I overdid it a little bit on the chips. I used up the whole bag because I was like, whatever, I'm not using these for anything else. So it's definitely very heavy on the chips, but I like the way that it turned out. But if you're looking for something that's not as like flashy and not as loud, you could definitely use way less chips, or use no chips at all, or use a more muted color of chips. So that's just a personal decision. I like the way it turned out. I think it's kind of quirky, but that's just something that you can know that like you don't have to have as many chips. You can just sprinkle it sparsely if that's something that you want to do. But in terms of coverage, I just took them in my hand and kind of threw them out along the edges, and you know, you couldn't walk back on the floor obviously because it was wet, so I had to stand at the door and kind of do it from there. The chips you can find at Home Depot or Lowe's, and they usually have pretty neutral colors, but if you want to get different colors, you can always go on like Amazon or eBay and find some of those as well. So after we threw down the chips, that was really all that we did. We did not use any kind of sealant to go back over it. We said, that's it, we're done, and we just let everything dry. So the next day after everything had dried, I went back in with a handheld vacuum cleaner, and I got back up all the chips that had not stuck to the floor. There was a few. There was also some chips that were like on the upper level of the shed, so I had to get those as well, just from throwing everything everywhere. So after cleaning all of that up, we kind of let that sit for a couple more hours, and then we were ready to put everything back in the shed, which was its own real project, trying to get everything back in there. And I will say that I'm pretty big on decluttering and throwing away stuff that I don't need. So one big part of the decluttering was just kind of getting rid of some things that had been in there for a while that we really had no purpose for. And you know, after a while you realize, I gotta let this stuff go. This stuff is not doing anything for me. It's just taking up space. So we did wind up throwing away a good bit of stuff. And I'll say that just being able to reorganize from scratch really helps me, because I was able to kind of say, okay, this side is going to be for things that I use every day, and then this side is going to be for long-term storage. So things like Christmas and Halloween decorations, the vacuum that we never use, the pressure washer that we never use, some of those old tools and things that really just are bulky and take up a lot of space that we just did not have room to put on the main floor. And I think that one of the main organization issues that I faced initially was that we used so much of the floor space in that shed that we really could never get in there and get what we were looking for. Like, we would know where something was, but we could not physically get to it. So being able to open up that floor space, I think, was it made a really big impact on how we can access our belongings now. So in addition to putting the shelves back in, I went and bought some little baskets from the Dollar Tree. These were $1.25, and I labeled them with what was in the baskets, especially if the basket was full of a bunch of random crap. I put the label on there and went ahead and kind of organized everything in terms of like logically, how would I look for this? I also added in some different totes, some different little baskets. There was a thing for my drill, some things for my paint, and I'm trying to keep all the different project supplies in its own space now, because when I am saying, okay, I'm ready to paint, I can just pull out my paint container and I don't have to look for different paint supplies all over the shed. So just kind of thinking logically and thinking in terms of like, how easy is it to pull this out? And I like that the Dollar Tree baskets all have handles. It makes it so much easier, because if I were to just stack that supplies and kind of push it back, I would have to move everything in order to get to it. So now I can just pull out the basket that I'm looking for, look in it, get the thing out, and then push the basket back in. So it really does make things easier easier in terms of finding what you're looking for. And I'm really big on organization. It's something that sort of started as a hobby, I guess, but it's morphed into like a giant OCD tendency at this point. My house is very organized and I like to keep it that way. I like to keep everything in its place. That way when I'm looking for something, I don't have to stress out over it. So I'll just say that adding those Dollar Tree products really helped. Another thing that I got from the Dollar Tree was an over-the-door rack, so I could hang up my mops and my like cleaning supplies. That was only $1.25, and I might actually add another one of those, just kind of seeing how I like it at this point. And then in addition to that, Dollar Tree had some little organizers that you could put tools in, so I added 2 of those, and I put like my screwdrivers, a pair of scissors, things like that I wanted to access quickly. And obviously I could keep those in a toolbox or on the shelves. I just like being able to walk into the shed and like grab the screwdriver that I need and go onwards to my project that I'm working on. Whatever I'm trying to build or put together, I want to be able to easily access the supplies that I need. So Dollar Tree is a great resource in terms of like little organization tactics that you can use. And in addition to that, I bought a hanging mount for all of like my rakes and shovels and brooms and things like that. So this was a little bit more sturdy than the Dollar Tree one. It was about $10 on Amazon. It holds 4 different things, and it also has hooks for 5 different things. And speaking of hooks, hooks are underrated in the organization space. I bought a pack of S hooks, and these hooks are super good if you have a wire metal rack that you want to hang things on like we do in the shed. So I bought a pack of those, and I was able to organize some more things like hanging things off the side racks, things that we don't really use that often. Like we have a caulk gun that I don't think I've used it like 1 time. So I mean, things like that you don't need to be able to grab quickly, I put kind of hidden and kind of pushed back in the shed. So those hooks are a great resource. And we also have some magnetic hooks. Those I got to go on my cruise, but I wound up using them for all kinds of other things in my house. So definitely look into magnetic hooks. So in terms of this project, I say that honestly the prep work and the organization took up most of the time. The painting was really not that big of a deal. I mean, I feel like anyone can paint, and you know, we weren't super worried about the edging and everything being perfect because we knew we were going to just put all our stuff back in there anyways. So I wasn't super concerned about that, but if you wanted to, you could always tape up with painter's tape whatever that you're working on if you want it to be, you know, perfect, especially if it's a space that is going to be more accessed by guests or something like that. But for us, honestly, we're the only ones who really ever go in that shed and ever see it. So in terms of the painting, it really was not hard at all. I think that anybody can do this project. In terms of cost, like I said, it was under $200 to do this. So making over a room for that amount of money is really cheap in terms of home improvement projects, because what I've found is that the project usually takes twice as long to finish and it costs twice as much. So that's my rule of thumb when it comes to home improvement projects, which I've redone a lot of this house myself. I've painted pretty much every room. We've done a lot of things to kind of elevate the space because it is such an old house, and there are, you know, some issues with it, but overall I think it's holding on pretty strong, and I'm going to continue working on it and going to continue trying to make one thing better at a time. I think the next project that I'm going to try to tackle is going to be my front porch, but honestly there's a lot of things I need to do to prep that surface as well, so it might be time to drag out that pressure washer and get to work. I really hope that you guys enjoyed seeing my newly refinished shed, and I love that I'm able to do projects like this and just kind of take things on, and you know, just being confident in yourself and being able to try something and just not know how it's going to go, I think is a skill in itself. So if you are concerned about, oh, I'm not really sure how to do it, or I don't know about this or that, just go for it. You'll learn as you go and you will be surprised at what you can accomplish. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.